So there I was scrolling on Twitter as Twitter user Nib put up the screenshot for this article, which said Microsoft's gaming business falls short despite Activision. Nib put a whole lot of stuff on here, and I thought, why not go ahead and chase down the article? It's behind a paywall apparently, but it gave me a free article. I guess, thanks for showing up, and it was this one. So I'm like, sure, let's go ahead and take a look at it. It's written by Aaron Holmes from the information.com. Now, Aaron Holmes writes, in 2021, CEO Satya Nadella faced a choice involving the company's Xbox cloud gaming business. The company could either acquire major game studios to drive more subscriptions to its nascent Game Pass subscription service, or it could wind down its games business entirely, Nadella told two people at the time. Interesting. Nadella took the first path, acquiring Elder Scrolls maker Bethesda Studios for $7 billion in 2021 and Call of Duty maker Activision Blizzard for $75.4 billion in the fall of 2023. So far, the returns on the investment appear unimpressive. In the year to June, Microsoft's gaming business revenue grew 5.8%, well below the 11% target set for the purpose of calculating part of Nadella's compensation, according to the securities filings. That growth excludes revenue of Activision since its acquisition, but includes Game Pass. Now, there is a timeline going on here. The writer of this article is drawing a line from 2021 to around 2023. However, during the Activision Blizzard trial, we got to see some 2022 numbers. Do y'all remember this little chart that we talked about and the little conversation that was actually taken as a snippet from the cross-examination of Phil Spencer by the FTC lawyer, asking him about gross margins and gross margin percentages and accountability margin and how operating profit that is kept by the companies are actually segregated? Do you remember that conversation? When Tweaktown put together a chart to actually show the difference, you could see that actually for the fiscal year 2022 in its first 9 months, Xbox's revenue was low, and they were aware that their profit margins were, in a sense, similar, because there's a part where Phil Spencer said that their profit margins had basically moved to about single digits. There was a part where their profit margins were similar or slightly more than PlayStation, depending on how you calculate it, basically based on operating profits. So this particular article, I don't know if it's putting that in context or if it's going directly to say, well, Xbox had shot for the moon with Game Pass at 100 million subscribers. They tied it to Satya Nadella's bonus, and then that didn't turn out to be the reality, right? If that was what they were going for. Also, if they were talking about the growth, revenue growing 5.8%, what was the previous revenue set to actually add to that 5.8%? Was the revenue zero? Was it 1%? Was it 2%? Was it 4%? Was it 5%? So these are some questions that I haven't gotten any answer from in reading these two paragraphs. Not saying anything is wrong. I'm just saying there's just a lot in here that could be unpacked. If there was more information, it would make sense. I'm going to continue. The author writes and says, gaming was the only section of his pay evaluation that fell short of Microsoft's goals. Meanwhile, in the 3 months ending September 30th, this is probably 2023, Microsoft indicated that its gaming division didn't grow at all without the first-time contribution of Activision revenue in the quarter. Okay? For many investors, Microsoft's performance in gaming ranks is less likely important than its progress in artificial intelligence. Questions about whether the company's big investment in new data centers will generate a return have weighed on investors' minds and are likely the major reason why the stock rose only 12% last year, well below the number for every other big tech firm. Even so, given the sheer amount Microsoft has spent on gaming expansion, the Activision purchase was its biggest ever. The outcome of Nadella's gaming bet is important in the long run. $70 billion is not pittance. It's a lot of cash. They might lose money in the short term, which is fine, as long as they can prove that in the long run, Game Pass is a solid source of recurring revenue, said Wedbush analyst Michael Pachter. Now, as much as I would say Michael Pachter, he made some solid predictions during the Activision, acquisition fiasco. But Xbox's business is not relegated to just Game Pass. I don't understand how the media, the analysts, and everybody is just all fixated on Game Pass. And none of them are looking at PlayStation and Steam and Xbox as other revenue streams for what Microsoft is doing with their gaming division. Isn't it interesting? Like, right? Like, you think about the multi-pronged approach, and I think it really does go ahead to tell you that there simply is a very weird disconnect. Even when, like, if you look at, say, the infamous PlayStation, document that leaked, when I cite that document, everybody loses their mind. But even the threat analysis from inside of PlayStation showed that Microsoft can supply multi-game, subscription console, and PC. I think PlayStation is the best judge as to how a gaming company would deploy video games and how that can be actually very interesting in the market overall. However, it seems the analysts are just fixated on a small pain point and ignoring the rest. Plus, it's not like they acquired Bethesda and nothing happened. They acquired Bethesda as a content generating machine, and also Activision as a content generating machine that deploys its content potentially on other platforms. Interesting. This is just my observations. I'm just, throwing some context in there. So Uncharted territory, Microsoft first launched its Game Pass subscription service in 2017. It charges customers $12 to $20 per month for access to a library of games from any device. By launching the service, Microsoft is forging into uncharted territory. The company hopes to prove a business model that is now omnipresent in movies and television streaming can also prove successful in video games. Big firms like Activision have historically been reluctant to put their games on all-you-can-play subscription service, worried they would make less money than they do by selling games outright at $60 to $70 a piece. Buying Activision allowed Microsoft to change the dynamic. This is something that PlayStation looked and saw and concluded that it was a threat to the industry, a disruption. So basically, Microsoft bought Game Pass. You see, again, the journalist is looking at it as, an uncharted territory. The analysts are saying it doesn't seem like it's doing anything big. The competitor is saying it's a disruption in the market. You can see all the perspectives coming together. I see it as a full-blown disruption. I remember when I first saw it, I said, this is mad. It's kind of like Amazon when they came out and they said free 2-day shipping. Do y'all remember when Amazon started doing the free 2-day shipping? What did you think in your mind? There's no way these guys are going to give me free 2-day shipping. Have they lost their minds? That was the disruption in the market. It put everybody else on blast, and it made everybody else start to think, how are we going to serve our customers with this level of customer service? Does this even exist? Now, the whole system and the whole whatever of Amazon and the way they do shipping with, UPS and all that, that's a USPS, that's a whole different conversation, because again, I've spoken to, people who work in the postal system and how all this works, and it's not been the greatest package overall, especially in this time frame. However, I do remember how that was very disruptive in the online, retail market. So he continues. Since then, however, several leading game studios have resisted Microsoft's pitch that they should put their games on Game Pass in exchange for fees that Microsoft offers to pay to the gaming studios, according to people familiar with the discussions. I don't believe it. I don't know who said that. I mean, we saw Pearl Abyss, we saw Square Enix. I mean, so if you don't have anybody to tell me that, whatever the heck that is, I'm sorry. I just think the majority of games, this is a quote, majority of the game market doesn't really want a Game Pass like the one Microsoft is offering, said Gus Zinn, a portfolio manager of the Macquarie Science and Technology Fund, which holds roughly $400 million in Microsoft stock and has kept its Microsoft position roughly flat over the past year. Okay. Game Pass is a disruption in the market. It doesn't necessarily require believers from investors and everybody else. Why? How, and no offense, does the fund manager, and I saw on Nib's post, a lot of people saying, well, if a fund manager can a fund manager is looking for quick yields. A fund manager is not necessarily here to help you, enjoy your disruption of the market. They're looking for viable ways to make money in a short term. Now, in some cases, there will be long-term plays, but you got to see gains. You got to be able to give your, investors and people who actually, invest into your fund a reason for them to be able to do so. And so they need to be seeing those gains being realized in the short term. Game Pass is a long-term transformation of the market, and Microsoft has the capability to sit it through compared to anybody else. And the reason people don't want it is because they want the traditional means. Go and sweat $70 to buy our game, your hard-earned money. And then when you basically at launch buy our game for $70, no offense to developers, we're then going to go discount it to $5 later down the road. Has anybody looked at CD keys lately? Anybody look at the sales this holiday? Look at all these games basically being given away for $2 in some cases. $2 and console too. Aha. Do you see somebody wants the status quo to stay? Microsoft, according to this article, I'm continuing to read, also hope the Activision will attract game developers to rent its Azure cloud servers. I wonder, when was this conveyed? Anyways, but Activision wasn't using Azure prior to the deal, and it still rents servers from Google Cloud and Amazon Web Services while primarily relying on its own servers for development, according to someone with direct knowledge of the situation and another person briefed on it. Don't believe you. Again, you got to be able to provide much more solid, sources. I don't know how I'd say it, but okay, it might as well be true. I'm just saying, like, why would you want to go ahead and start to rock the boat and now spend all that money moving all of that infrastructure to Azure at the same time? It doesn't make any sense. Activision already had $60 billion in their bank account, enough money to develop another game. I said another game. They could develop how many games? Like 7 Call of Duty games with that $60 billion. And they should be fine. I mean, you also have, payroll and stuff, but they could stay fine. So no need to rock the boat. So I don't know what this is supposed to convey, that they were supposed to somehow use that to attract people. If we even want to look at, say, the use of Microsoft servers, and, I think this is where we have to educate people who are not into gaming. You can look at June of 2023. Who was the latest game to actually jump into Azure PlayFab? Does anybody know? Open quiz. Who was the latest game to jump into Azure PlayFab? It was Street Fighter 6. The previously exclusive game to PlayStation in its past iteration, Street Fighter 5, they're using Azure for hosting their services. And this is not even including PlayStation, who uses Azure to also host its cloud gaming as well. Interesting. Before completing the Activision acquisition, Microsoft targeted having over 100 million Game Pass subscribers by 2030, meaning it will have to triple its current subscriber base in 5 years or grow at the rate of 40% annually, which would be faster than its rate of growth every year since 2020. They shot too high, right? The company previously included Game Pass growth as one of the metrics determined by such as pay package, but it limited a provision in October 2023 after it failed to meet Game Pass growth targets in the prior 2 years. When reached for a comment, Microsoft spokesperson referred to Nadella's remarks to shareholders in October that Game Pass has set a new record in the quarter prior, and that a record number of people has signed up for Game Pass on the day Microsoft published Activision's new Call of Duty Black Ops 6 title. Some shareholders say Activision's contribution wouldn't matter much as long as Microsoft generates growth in other areas like cloud, AI, and software sales. I mean, that's obvious. Activision has been disappointing, says Danny Fish, a Janus Henderson Investors portfolio manager who oversees 2 funds that included a total of more than $800 million in Microsoft stock as of November. It's also a business that had some degree of consistency over 3 to 5 year period, but was highly volatile from year to year because you're so dependent on big releases like Call of Duty. Everybody knew that for the most part. Everybody already knew that Call of Duty was already volatile in a sense. But again, what are these hedge fund managers, or I won't say hedge fund managers, but what are these, portfolio managers? What are they expecting to happen in 24 months from a game publisher? Those of us who, we've sat for half decades to almost decades waiting for games to come out, like freaking GTA 6. Can you imagine, like, Take-Two, you're saying after 2 years about some Take-Two, whatever, like, oh man, I'm just sitting here waiting. You can't do that. So again, I'm not really certain what this is meant to actually convey. However, Microsoft's heavy spending on data centers for AI is a big drag on their stock price than the Activision deal, Fish said. Bro, I read this whole article that is paywalled, coming out with nothing that I didn't already know, nor anything that was lacking some significant context. Now, I have to also address the fact that I saw this on Nip's timeline, and it seems to me that there is a confirmation bias with a lot of PlayStation fanboys. If you look at a lot of his missive on this, Activision has been disappointing, said Denny Fish, Janice Henderson, blah, blah, blah. All of this stuff, right? Also, just highlighting all of the points that this article basically goes for, which is fine, which is fair. A lot of the things that Microsoft had anticipated, it could not reach those goals. But if you read it without the context of the fact that, or the possibility and the likelihood that Xbox might be profitable than PlayStation, then you kind of go ahead and say, perhaps this context that's missing really changes the entire narrative overall. So what would PlayStation's business look like if we actually looked and did an entire, like if this article took a similar approach and looked at the competitor in the market that, Xbox is in? What if they actually wrote an article that actually assessed everything, and then we looked at, say, what their revenue looks like and what their margin looks like? I mean, this is bizarre. This is quite bizarre. It's almost dysfunctional. For both of them, it's weird, but for PlayStation, it's bizarre in a much more interesting way, because if this is their profit margin, and I keep saying if because it's alleged, then they really have a lot of work to do. I mean, if you're talking about Activision being volatile, I don't know, man. All PlayStation needs is I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, their business, well, a lot of their business dealings are actually, they're quite secretive as well too. They keep some things under wraps. They show some things like, their console sales and all that. But those things, if those things are really making all this money, where's all that money? Like, people say that these things are, profitable and blah, blah, but where's all that money going? So PlayStation will probably have to be in a position where it seemingly just cuts on its content production, which is a separate video I wanted to make, to pretty much allow for its profit margin to grow significantly. Can they do that by depending on other games? I don't know. I guess we'll see. But I thought I'd hear you guys' thoughts on this particular article. I thought it was very interesting. Talk to me in the comment section. I appreciate you guys' time and audience, and hopefully we'll talk pretty soon in another one. Peace out.